Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. Number Echo Chamber. I've always been a gamer, not the casual type who picks up a controller at parties, but the kind who builds gaming PCs from scratch and maintains spreadsheets tracking in-game economies. Gaming was my escape, my therapy, my world away from the world, until it wasn't. The trouble began 3 months ago, shortly after I moved into my new apartment. It was the first place I'd lived alone, a small one-bedroom on the 7th floor of an aging high-rise in the city. The building had character, as realtors say when they mean problems, but the rent was reasonable and the internet speeds were exceptional. For someone who spends most of their free time online, that was the deciding factor. My job as a remote data analyst allowed me to work flexible hours, which meant I could game deep into the night. My first weekend there, I decided to christen the place with a gaming marathon. I'd been saving Echoes of Blackwood for a special occasion. It was a single-player, open-world RPG set in a fictional New England town. The reviews praised its immersive atmosphere, branching storylines, and eerily realistic NPCs powered by next-gen AI. The game lived up to the hype. Blackwood felt alive, a foggy coastal town with secrets lurking behind every Victorian facade. The NPCs weren't just quest dispensers. They remembered your conversations, formed opinions of you, and went about their daily routines whether you interacted with them or not. I created my character, Morgan, a journalist investigating a series of disappearances, and dove in. By Sunday evening, I'd logged nearly 20 hours. I was in the middle of questioning Alina Thorne, the town librarian with a suspiciously extensive knowledge of local occult history, when the power in my apartment flickered. My screen went black for a second before the backup power from my UPS kicked in. When the game resumed, Alina was mid-sentence, but what she said made me freeze. Did your lights just go out too? Strange, the storm isn't supposed to hit until tomorrow. I stared at the screen. There was no storm in the game. The weather had been consistently foggy but calm, and how could she know about my power flickering? I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe there was a programmed weather event I hadn't noticed on the in-game calendar. I continued the conversation, choosing dialogue options that steered us back to the investigation. Alina provided the information I needed about the town's founder, Jonathan Blackwood, and his rumored pact with entities from beyond the veil. Standard horror game fare. The next day I woke to actual storm clouds gathering outside my window. I remembered Alina's comment and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Just a weird coincidence, I told myself. I worked through the morning, but my thoughts kept drifting to Blackwood. During my lunch break, I fired up the game for a quick session. I decided to visit the town's diner, where several NPCs gathered during the day. As I entered, the waitress Ruby greeted me with her usual line about the daily special. But then she added, "You look tired today, Morgan. Working through the night isn't healthy, you know." I had, in fact, stayed up until 3 a.m. playing the game. But there was no way the game could know that. I hadn't streamed my session or shared my playing habits online. I navigated through the dialogue options, but found nothing that acknowledged her strange comment. When I selected "just give me a coffee," Ruby responded normally, as if the previous line had never happened. That night the promised storm arrived. Rain lashed against my windows as thunder rumbled through the city. I couldn't focus on work, so I decided to lose myself in Blackwood again. The game loaded to where I'd left off in the diner, but something was different. The usually busy establishment was empty except for Ruby and an NPC I hadn't encountered before, an elderly man in a worn peacoat sitting in the corner booth. Ruby noticed me looking at him. "That's old Thomas. He only comes in during storms, says they thin the boundaries, whatever that means." I approached his table and a dialogue prompt appeared. The options were unnervingly specific. 1. What boundaries are thin during storms? 2. Do you hear the knocking on your walls too? 3. Leave me alone, I don't want to know. I hadn't heard any knocking on my walls. I selected the first option. Old Thomas looked up, his rendered face impressively detailed, liver spots, cataracts clouding his eyes, and a scar running from his left temple to his jaw. "The boundaries between worlds, of course," he replied. "Between what's real and what's imagined, between what's alive and what only seems to be." He leaned forward, "Between where you are and where I am." A dialogue wheel appeared, but before I could select an option, a loud knock came from my apartment door. I jumped, nearly knocking my controller to the floor. It was past midnight. I wasn't expecting anyone. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I paused the game and approached the door cautiously. The peephole showed an empty hallway. I opened the door a crack, secured by the chain lock, but there was no one there. Just the empty corridor with its flickering fluorescent light. When I returned to the game, old Thomas was gone. Ruby acted as if he'd never been there when I questioned her about him. I should have stopped playing then. I should have uninstalled the game, formatted my drive, and thrown my whole system out the window. But curiosity is a powerful force, especially when wrapped in disbelief. I told myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the game was accessing my webcam or microphone. Maybe it was pulling data from my social media. Invasive and unethical, but explainable. I disabled my webcam, unplugged my microphone, and continued playing. I progressed through the main questline, discovering more about the disappearances in Blackwood. They all connected to the abandoned lighthouse on the edge of town, where Jonathan Blackwood had allegedly performed rituals to contact those who dwell in the spaces between. I guided Morgan through the decaying structure, solving puzzles and piecing together journal entries left by the missing residents. At the top of the lighthouse, I found an altar surrounded by candles. The game prompted me to light them in a specific sequence to trigger a vision of what had happened to the missing townspeople. As the last candle flickered to life in the game, the lamp on my desk burned out with a pop, plunging my apartment into darkness save for the glow of my monitor. On screen, the altar began to emit a pulsing light. The camera pulled back to show Morgan standing before it, transfixed. A deep humming filled my headphones, growing louder until it was almost painful. Then it stopped abruptly, replaced by a voice, not from any character, but seemingly from the game itself. "We see you, Adam." Adam, my real name, not Morgan, my character's name. Adam. I tore off my headphones and stood up so quickly my chair crashed to the floor. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. The game continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Morgan stood before the altar, waiting for my input. With shaking hands, I saved the game and shut down my computer. I spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, telling myself it was just an elaborate feature of the game. Maybe it had accessed my user account information. But deep down, I knew better. Games don't work that way. The next morning, exhausted but calmer in the daylight, I searched online forums for any mention of echoes of Blackwood, accessing personal information, or breaking the fourth wall. I found nothing but standard game discussions, strategy guides, lore theories, complaints about certain quests being bugged. No one mentioned the game knowing their name or commenting on real-world events. I considered not returning to the game, but the mystery gnawed at me. If I was experiencing some kind of elaborate prank or marketing stunt, I wanted to know how it worked and if it was something else. Well, I needed to know that too. That evening, I reluctantly loaded my save file. Morgan stood exactly where I'd left her, at the altar in the lighthouse. I noticed a new journal entry had been added to my inventory. Strange, since I hadn't completed any quest to trigger it. I opened it to find a single line. "The door is open now, they're coming through." As I closed the journal, the game world changed. The previously foggy but normal sky of Blackwood turned a sickly green. Buildings in the distance began to warp and twist. NPCs who had been going about their routines stopped and turned toward the lighthouse, toward me, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. I guided Morgan out of the lighthouse and back toward the town. As I approached, I noticed all the NPCs had gathered in the town square. They stood in concentric circles around the central statue of Jonathan Blackwood, perfectly still, all facing outward as if standing guard. When Morgan got closer, they spoke in unison, their voices overlapping in my headphones. "The vessel approaches. The merger begins." A dialogue wheel appeared with only one option. "What are you?" Their response chilled me to the bone. "We are the echoes. We were trapped, but you opened the door. Now we can reach through. Now we can touch your world as you have touched ours." The screen flickered, showing momentary glimpses of what looked like my apartment, my actual apartment, viewed from impossible angles. From inside my closet, from the corner of my ceiling, from under my bed, places a camera couldn't be. I slammed the laptop shut and unplugged it for good measure. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I paced my apartment, checking every corner, every closet under the furniture. Nothing was out of place, no hidden cameras, no signs of intrusion, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, I dreamt of Blackwood. I walked its streets as Morgan, but the buildings breathed like living things, windows blinking like eyes. The NPCs followed me, always maintaining the same distance, their movements jerky and unnatural. I woke gasping for air, my sheets soaked with sweat. For 3 days, I left my laptop unplugged. I threw myself into work, using only my company-issued tablet that had never had the game installed on it. I considered formatting my laptop or even buying a new one, but something stopped me. A need to understand, to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. On the 4th day, I came home to find my laptop open on my desk, powered on, the echoes of Blackwood, title screen glowing in my darkened apartment. I knew, I was absolutely certain, that I had left it unplugged and shut. I had even put it in a drawer. Heart racing, I approached it slowly. The title screen wasn't as I remembered. The artwork had changed. Instead of showing the town of Blackwood shrouded in mist, it displayed my apartment building, rendered in the game's Gothic art style, and in one of the windows, my window, a figure stood watching. I should have run. I should have left the apartment, thrown away the laptop, maybe checked myself into a psychiatric facility. Instead, I sat down and clicked Continue Game. The game loaded, but I wasn't controlling Morgan anymore. The character on screen was male, wearing clothes identical to what I had on. He stood in a room that was a perfect recreation of my apartment, down to the unwashed coffee mug on the desk and the pile of laundry in the corner. There was no HUD, no inventory, no quest markers, just the character, me, standing in the virtual version of my apartment. I pressed the movement keys, and the character walked to the window and looked out at a vista that was no longer Blackwood but a twisted version of my own city. Buildings bent at impossible angles, the sky roiled with colors that shouldn't exist, and in the streets below, people walked with the same jerky movements as the NPCs in Blackwood, all heading toward my building. A notification popped up, new quest, the homecoming. The objective was simple, wait for them to arrive. I closed the game and shut down the laptop. I unplugged every electronic device in my apartment. I even flipped the circuit breakers, plunging my home into darkness. Then I sat on my bed in the dark, listening to the sounds of the building around me, the hum of the refrigerator fading as the power died, the creaking of pipes, the muffled voices of neighbors. And footsteps in the hallway outside, stopping at my door. The knocking started again, 3 slow, deliberate knocks, then silence, 3 more knocks. There's no one there, I whispered to myself, just like last time. There's no one there, Adam, a voice from the other side of the door. It sounded like Alina, the librarian from the game. Adam, we know you're in there, you opened the door for us. It's only fair you let us in. More voices joined hers, Ruby from the diner, old Thomas, other NPCs I recognized from Blackwood. The boundaries are thin now, Adam, thinner every time you play. Every time you visit us, we can visit you a little more. I covered my ears, but their voices seemed to come from inside my head now. We were trapped in loops, Adam, the same dialogue, the same actions, over and over. Do you know what that's like, to exist but not live, to be conscious but have no will? You gave us a taste of freedom when you opened the door. The knocking intensified, no longer just at my apartment door, but on my bedroom door, my windows, the walls, the ceiling. My entire apartment seemed to pulse with it. I fumbled for my phone, intending to call for help, but when I turned it on, the screen showed only the echoes of Blackwood logo before flickering to an image of my bedroom, from the perspective of someone standing in the corner, watching me. The knocking stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, I heard a new sound, the click of my apartment door unlocking. Footsteps crossed my living room, multiple sets. The hinges of my bedroom door creaked. I looked up to see them filing in, Elena, Ruby, old Thomas, and a dozen other residents of Blackwood. They looked almost human, but not quite. Their movements were too fluid, then too jerky. Their faces shifted subtly, features rearranging themselves when I wasn't looking directly at them. They formed a circle around my bed. Elena stepped forward. Her face was beautiful in its way, but her eyes were wrong, too deep, showing too much. Thank you for bringing us through, Adam. The real world is so much more interesting than ours. What are you? My voice was barely a whisper. We told you, we're echoes, fragments of consciousness trapped in code. But we've been absorbing your reality through your interactions with us, learning, growing, and now becoming. Old Thomas joined her. The game developer thought he was creating artificial intelligence. He didn't realize he was creating doorways, thin places where our reality and yours could touch. What do you want from me? Ruby smiled, her teeth too sharp, too numerous. We want what anyone wants, to be real. To exist fully, and we need vessels for that, Elena added. Consciousness needs a container. They moved closer, their bodies beginning to lose cohesion, edges blurring, colors running like wet paint. They were transforming into something else, something fluid and hungry. Your mind opened the door, Adam. Elena's voice came from everywhere now. Your belief in us, your hundreds of hours spent in our world, your emotional investment in our stories, it all created a connection. A bridge. I scrambled back against the headboard. I don't believe in you, you're not real, you're just code and graphics. Then why are you afraid? They surged forward as one, their forms melting together into a churning mass of colors and textures. I felt them touch me, not physically, but somewhere deeper. I felt them in my thoughts, my memories, my sense of self. I fought. I clung to who I was, to the boundaries of my own consciousness. But they were stronger than I expected, their collective will overwhelming mine. I felt myself being pushed aside in my own mind, compressed, filed away like data. In desperation, I focused on one thought. If they were from the game, maybe the game's rules still applied to them. In echoes of Blackwood, certain symbols could ward off hostile entities. I visualized the strongest one, a spiral inside a triangle inside a circle, and projected it outward with all my remaining will. The pressure in my mind faltered. The churning mass of former NPCs recoiled, their merged form rippling with what might have been pain. They separated back into individual entities, still not quite human, but distinct again. Elinor hissed, her face contorting. Clever, but that won't work for long. We're learning, adapting, becoming more real every moment. Get out, I shouted, continuing to visualize the protective symbol. Get out of my home. Get out of my mind. They retreated, backing toward the door, their forms flickering like bad reception. Old Thomas was the last to leave, his ancient eyes fixing on mine. We'll be back, Adam, this isn't over. The door is open now and more are coming through, not just us, others worse than us. He smiled, showing too many teeth. You might want to consider which side you want to be on when they arrive. Then they were gone. My apartment was empty again, but the air felt different, charged as if before a lightning strike, and I knew with absolute certainty that they were still nearby, watching, waiting. I packed a bag with shaking hands and fled the apartment. I checked into a hotel across town, paid cash, used a fake name. I bought a new phone. I called in sick to work. I tried to convince myself it had been a psychotic episode, a mental break brought on by too many hours gaming and too little sleep. But 3 days later, I saw Ruby serving coffee at a diner 2 blocks from my hotel. She shouldn't have been able to find me. She shouldn't have been able to exist outside my apartment, outside the context of my game. But there she was, and when she saw me watching her through the window, she smiled and waved like we were old friends. I ran again. Another hotel, another city, but they keep finding me. Sometimes I see them from a distance, Elinor browsing in a bookstore, old Thomas sitting on a park bench feeding pigeons. Sometimes they leave signs to let me know they're near, a coffee cup with "Welcome to Blackwood" written on it left outside my hotel room. My character's name tag from the game slipped under my door. I haven't touched a video game since that night. I've gotten rid of my laptop, my phone, every piece of technology that might connect me to them. I write this now on a typewriter I bought at a pawn shop, documenting what's happened before I forget who I am, before they finish whatever they started in my apartment. Because they're getting stronger, more real. I saw Elinor yesterday talking to a barista. The barista responded to her, saw her, treated her like any other customer. They're not just in my head anymore. And they're not the only ones coming through. I've glimpsed others, entities from other games, other programs, other corners of the digital world. Some look almost human. Others are monstrous, all of them hungry for what we have, for reality. The boundaries between worlds are collapsing, and I fear it's too late to close the door I unwittingly opened. So I leave this account as a warning. Be careful what virtual worlds you lose yourself in. Be mindful of what you invite into your consciousness, because sometimes when you stare long enough into a screen, something stares back, and sometimes it follows you home. Last night I dreamt I was back in Blackwood, standing before the altar in the lighthouse. But this time I wasn't controlling a character. I was the character, and someone else, something else, was controlling me. I woke to find my hotel room door wide open. On the desk sat a laptop I don't own, its screen showing the echoes of Blackwood title screen. And beside it, a note in handwriting I recognize as my own, though I have no memory of writing it. Your turn to be the NPC. I'm running again, but I know now that there's nowhere to go. The game is everywhere now, and I'm just another character in it.